for a period of I don't know how long, whether it was 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, these guys will come and eat their food, drink their drink, and then they'll rape me. That's what my book is all about. So my book starts from there up to now. It wasn't easy time to go through. It was hard. And there are times when I wanted to run away. And I ran away and I got to this bridge. And behind me, I could see my uncle's house in the distance. And then I could see Kampala, which is the capital city, in front of me. And the voice said to me to go back. Yes, so I was born in Uganda. And I came to Britain at the age of 9. So I've grown up in Britain all my life.
Right. You want to tell me about your infancy growing up in Uganda? What do you remember?
Oh gosh, Uganda was not fun for me as a child. Due to a lot of things that I went through, a lot of abuse, etc. and so forth. So it was not really. I had a fun time to begin with, and then it went really, really sour. And I think a lot of this I talk about in my book. So, yeah.
All right. You say you went through something. Do you want to share with us? People are interested in what you went through because that is your personal story now.
Amazing. So this is a quick story that happened in Uganda. There was a young lady, and this lady had 7 children. And out of 7 children, she had 4 boys, 3 girls. And her youngest daughter, she had a brain issue. And with that brain issue, it meant that she grew physically, but she couldn't grow mentally. So mentally, her mental age was stuck at the age of around 4 and 5. But she couldn't really speak. So when you saw her on the outside, she was developing as a young girl. She was about 25 years old. But when you went to speak to her, she couldn't speak. She was like, you would say hi and she'll be like, And her mother in Africa, they used to get up every morning and go and till the ground. And she used to take all her girls with her and amongst the other women. But whenever she took her daughter, her youngest, she'll get all the tools that they're supposed to be digging with, and she'll be playing with it and sometimes cutting herself. And while others were pulling out the weeds, she was trying to eat the weeds. And the children and the other women got frustrated and said, "Oh, for goodness sake, we can't do any work with your daughter here." So in the end, she decided she was going to leave her daughter at home. She left her daughter at home, and she would live on the veranda, and the neighbors say, "Don't worry, we'll keep an eye on her." And she would leave her food and her drink in one corner. And when she will come back before noon, she will find that her daughter would have eaten and drunk. But wherever she ate and drank is where she did her number 1 and number 2. So the first thing she came back, what she did was to clean her daughter, because she did not trust anyone to clean her daughter with dignity. So she cleaned her daughter up and everything. So one day she's cleaning her daughter and she realizes that her daughter's stomach is a bit hard. So she was a bit frustrated. So she talks to her son. Now, because her husband had died, her eldest son was the heir, and he was now like the husband in the home. So she spoke to him and the other women, and he said, "Oh, just bring some herbs from the village." So she went in the garden, she got some herbs. She made her drink some herbs. She made her bathe some herbs, but nothing was changing. In the end, her son turned around and gave her money and said to her, "Here's some money, go and get her checked at a clinic." She went to the clinic and got her, and she went to see the doctor, and the doctor came back, and She was hoping for the best news, but she knew it could be worse. And the doctor called her and said, I've got some bad news. And the doctor said, your daughter's pregnant. And the woman
how old was the daughter at the time?
She was around 25.
Okay.
So she said, yeah, she's pregnant. And she said, what? And they called her and they tried to explain to her, you know, what happened? What's going on? What happened? And all the girl could go and say, She couldn't really speak. And the daughter said, that's not the worst news. And she said, what is worse than that? She said, well, because her mind is not developing, her mind will not be able to tell her womb to open. So what would actually happen is, at the time of birth, her womb would not open, and therefore she would die in childbirth. And so would the baby inside of her. And the woman was distraught. And she left that hospital broken. And she, being Africa and no hope in anything else, she even went to a witch doctor, hoping that the witch doctor would give her some news of how to deal with it. And the witch doctor said, get that thing away from me. That thing is a curse. So she was no longer a child, but she was now a curse. So she went home and sat down her son and explained everything to her son. And her son said, I cannot make a decision as myself. The decision has to be made by the men in the family. So they called all the men in the family to have a meeting. And they went in the house and they had this meeting, and all the women waited outside to hear what the conclusion of the meeting was. After the meeting, she was called in the house. She sat down on the floor while they told her, we've made a decision. We're going to build a hut 200 meters into the garden. And when it's time for your daughter to give birth, we're going to put her in the hut so she can die there. She was devastated, and she was like, what am I going to do with my daughter? So the time came and her belly was getting bigger, but the more her belly grew, the weaker her legs got. And they used to carry her on the mat because she could no longer support the weight of her stomach. One day came, and from morning she was crying and screaming, and her mother knew this could be the day she's giving birth. So she kept checking and hoping she's dilated, hoping there's a sign, but there was nothing. So her son called the men and said, for goodness sake, just put her in the hut. But she interrupted and she said, no, before you put her in the hut, can I give her a name? And they said, what name are you going to give her? What's the point? She's going to die and the baby's going to die. And the woman said, well, this baby came from somewhere and the baby's going somewhere. And she said, okay, go ahead, just name the child. So she put her hand on her belly and she named the baby. And as soon as she finished naming the baby, they picked up the baby and they picked up the woman and took her to the hut. And without her knowledge, they put a padlock on the door. She went away and she could hear the screams, her daughter's screams. So in the end, she said, no, if my daughter's gonna die, she has to die in my arms. So she runs to the hut and pushes down the door, and the door starts swinging back and forth. And also, and the screams stop. And she believes it's the worst, the baby's dead. And as she looks down, the woman is not dead. In fact, she's just given birth. And the baby is there, except that she doesn't know it's a baby. She thinks it's a toy. And she begins to kick the baby and push the baby. So they quickly get the baby away from her. They cut the umbilical cord, and the now grandmother runs off with a grandchild. And this one is cleaned up. And by the grace of God, neither the baby nor the mother died. So sooner or later, everybody's coming to the village to see who is this one? Who is this one? What is she going to be like? She's going to be like her mom. Is she okay in her brain? Is she okay? So sooner or later, the grandmother realizes the child cannot have a good life in that village. So they looked for a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of the family and asked, would you adopt this child? And she said yes. And they said to her, only two conditions. Number one, you never change her name. Number two, you always make sure she comes back to the village so that she knows where she comes from. And she said yes. So she picked up the baby and took the baby with her to town and adopted her. Now, the moral of that story, and whenever I tell that story, I always tell that story on the background of, I'm a believer of the Bible, on the background of Jeremiah 1:5, where it says that before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I called you. And knowing that all of us have purpose on this earth, nobody came by accident, irrespective of how they came into that world. And so the baby, the name that she gave the baby was Tebitendwa Kirabo. And my name is Ruth Tebitendwa Kirabo. So I'm that baby.
Is that a true life story?
It's very true. And that's my life story.
Oh, my dear, you are a child of destiny. That is a powerful story.
That's how I came on earth.
That's a powerful story.
Yes.